Good morning. This is being recorded and this is set up as a webinar, so you won't be able to speak or you be on camera, but you can drop your comments anytime you like and your questions in the chat for us, and let us know if you have some questions that way. So at that, that's the end of our housekeeping. I'm gonna go ahead and, I do want to mention that this will be recorded and it will be posted in the legislative page for members only on the CBA website starting tomorrow. So Josh, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, please.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you, Vicki. I wanted to welcome everyone. We have a good and great presentations today that Vicki and I and the board has put together. The first is Captain Arnold Hardy from the California Highway Patrol. Each year in our Sacramento Capitol Day, we've had the CHP present. Captain Arnold Hardy is the new section commander and has been in a variety of places throughout the CHP. He's been from San Diego all the way up to the Valley Division in the commercial section. And now he runs at headquarters, the commercial section. So Captain Hardy, are you there? I don't know if he's in already.
I see him. So Captain, if you are on, I see several appearances on the screen for you, but they're all muted. So you just need to unmute one of them. And
yeah, good morning. Yeah, we're trying to, we had some technical difficulties, so we had to split up and use my login for it. So there's several of us on in different offices with my login. So
no problem. Michael, could you go to the next screen, please?
Well, welcome, Captain. Go right ahead and we'll let you give a brief description of what's happening with the CHP under COVID, and then into a couple of the specifics that you wanted to relay to the group.
Good morning. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. We're starting a little early, so my guys are coming in at 9:15. But I'll just give you a little history. My name is Arnold Hardy, captain here at Commercial Vehicle Section. I just took over in January of this year. My background is I have an extensive history in commercial vehicle operations. I did enforcement on the road for 6 years. I supervised our commercial program in Valley Division for 3. And then I was here in Commercial Vehicle Section as a lieutenant for 2 years. And then I oversaw a commercial vehicle facility down in San Onofre for a year before promoting back here to captain in our commercial vehicle section at headquarters. So as far as COVID and what we've been doing lately with our commercial vehicle operations, it's pretty much the same standards that everyone's been doing as far as safety, using masks. We have not necessarily stopped our enforcement. Still, the commercial vehicle facilities are still open. We're still doing inspections, but we're very, very cognizant of COVID and keeping other people safe and limiting our contact. And I'll let, when he comes back, Craig Weaver, talk about some of the things that they're doing in the facilities as far as the terminal inspections and whatnot, and basically limiting the number of people that are present at the terminals when they go do the inspections, and the motor carriers when they're doing their inspections, having them leave their materials outside the van and then they do all the materials in the van. So limiting contact. So our operations have pretty much stayed the same. And some areas, and I'll let the SPAB folks talk about that, what they're doing with those things in their facilities in those areas. But it's pretty much nothing has changed except for limiting contact.
Well, good, Captain. Well, your folks are getting organized. I just want to compliment the patrol on how you all have handled the protection of the Capitol during the riots last year and the demonstrations that turned into riots. I was down in front of the Capitol scrubbing off graffiti on the other side at OB1, OB2, Office Building 1 and 2, while your troops were protecting the Capitol and lives, obviously. And the commissioner personally, I saw, did a fabulous job talking with the demonstrators who were civil, and just did a fabulous job. You know, a lot of times I don't think people understand that the CHP protects the Capitol and state properties, and just wanted to compliment the patrol on it, because it was quite something to see. And there were a small group of agitators, as there are in many of these demonstrations, but the patrol and under the commissioner's leadership, really, I was really happy in a real difficult situation during the summer. And I know you all have been protecting the state resources since then as well. So give our thanks to the commissioner and your whole command team for that work. So it was good to see, especially when they took over the highway, and how quickly the patrol cleared the highway and restored vehicular and commerce traffic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pana. We really appreciate that. And we're very proud in the job that we do in protecting the citizens of California. So thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if any of your command staff are on yet. We did start a little early. We're trying to be efficient and effective here, but, and I will say one other thing before your staff gets on now. Several who have taken your position before, I want you to know, Captain, have become commissioners. So we're looking for high places for you as well.
Well, thank you.
Not anytime soon. We're not trying to get rid of the commissioner, but yeah, in the commercial division, in the commercial section, the commander has risen several times. So we're looking forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think give them a few more minutes. They're still
Okay.
wandering around. But I do have on today Chief Brett Fabry. He oversees my unit here. And then Craig Weaver, and he's our program manager for our motor carrier program. And Karen Brown, she's a motor carrier specialist 3. Working with Weaver. And then Sergeant David Kelly, he does my on-road enforcement commercial program. And Sergeant Scott Taylor and Melanie Boyack, they oversee the SPAD programs. They'll all be on there. So just mention their nature, they want to go with, and then I'll get them to go ahead and comment on whatever they need to, since it's kind of hard now with the login. I'm sorry about that. We thought we were going to get it set up in one room all together, but we made it work.
Oh, good. Well, you know, there may be at our question and answer period in a few minutes after your presentations, there may be some questions. I was just talking to a carrier of the association down in Ventura, in LA, actually, Lancaster, down in that area, Palmdale, and apparently in some divisions, and you may get questions on this later, SPAB has been hard to keep licensed drivers going under the SPAB system for driver tests and things. And I know you all shut down driver tests for a while there during the first stage of COVID, a live driver's test, because of the pandemic and all. In that case down there, apparently there's just one officer, and sometimes I think our carriers have talked about this, and we want to be extra vigilant. And we sent the patrol a letter that we had sent the governor last year talking about SPAB testing specifically. And as the governor moves forward to open schools where it's safe, we've got to remember that in order to move school kids, both on the home to school trip and on sports trips, as sports starts becoming online, we need SPAB drivers. So you might, there may be something we can do to maybe have another meeting to talk about, are we prepared for SPAB testing and making sure we get these things done? Because you can imagine if renewals are coming up and new SPAB drivers are trying to come into the system, it may be a resource question for the patrol. And we're talking to the Department of Education on the testing side. The superintendent there was good enough to allow online training and testing. So we're just looking for the live drive test. And a lot of times in the divisions, we might find that the SPAB testing officer, there may be one, and then it goes, that person may be sick with COVID or may have other problems. So we'd like to have a conversation about that to keep things going. I see someone has joined you there, Captain.
Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry, I think we got it set up in there, so I may be moving over, but we'll see. But so we're just about ready.
Okay, so you might, as we talk through today, you might be thinking about how else we can communicate on that. I know each of the divisions are independent and operate through the commander of those divisions. But you know, we want to make sure that both on the school, home to school side, because many of our member operators do home to school trips, and on the other side, the SPAB side, that is sports teams are going to be reactivated here soon. So there may be a demand for that that SPAB testing to get these school bus drivers, to keep them current and to renew.
I see. So when we're ready to talk about that, I'll let Sergeant Scott Taylor and his team cover that aspect for you.
Okay, that's Sergeant Scott.
Scott Taylor.
Yes,
All right. Super. Let's see if we get the captain back in another room with everybody. Not sure if they're gonna...
I don't see them on here yet, so I'll just wait, but we can continue.
Actually, Arnold, I am on there. We're actually signed on as one of the many U's on this. When we click on this, we are just another Captain Hardy.
All right. Well, Captain, if you'd like to introduce your first presenter.
You know, since I've Scott on here now, while the others are still working, we can go ahead and go with Scott Taylor, and we can talk about the SPAB portion that you'd like to discuss. So Scott, if you want to go ahead and present that for us.
Okay. Again, Sergeant Scott Taylor. I'm here with Melanie Boyack. She is the person in charge at our headquarters level of all of the school bus operations for on the testing side. Basically, we are completely aware that we are down people for the testing and those operations. And we are trying to make accommodations, but as you know, the Department of Ed can do online certifications, but you can't really do a school bus driving test online. So that's our major issue right now that we're trying to look at. And each division has its own unique issues that are going on right now. As you had talked about earlier, in Lancaster, Southern Division is experiencing a much greater level of COVID issues, and we had started up school bus training there, and then we had to stop it again because many of the officers were actually contracting COVID. So we're in that kind of situation right now.
We have many new officers too that have just come into the position because the other ones have retired, and they've not been able to be trained either because we haven't been able to provide training with the Department of Ed for our officers so that they can be certified to give the driven, the behind the wheel tests. So that's been an obstacle for us as well.
So just so you know that we are completely aware of all the situations and are trying to resolve it per everything else that we're trying to resolve under the new COVID world, and hopefully trying to come back out of it.
Well, whatever we can do to assist on any information, dispersing information or any other things we can do, we're happy to help from a statewide perspective or from each of the divisions. So please call upon us.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other updates on the SPAB testing side, Sergeant or Melanie?
Unfortunately, no, not many new updates. The offices are open except select ones in LA, like we said, because they've been impacted individually by COVID. But for the most part, majority of our offices are open for testing, both written and driven. So it's just a matter of having enough time on the calendar to get everybody through.
All right, Vicki, we're planning on taking questions after all the presentations then?
Yes, that, after when we get to the end of the CHIP presentation, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, very good. Captain, if there's nothing else on the SPAB side, we appreciate that. Appreciate understanding that some divisions have a real COVID issue, and sounds like so we're hopeful that folks are staying as safe as they can during this time and trying to stay healthy. So we appreciate that, Sergeant and Melanie, appreciate your time on that.
Awesome. So Mr. Pane, if you want to continue on now, we have Craig Weaver. He can talk about our off-highway and terminal inspection portions of it.
Oh, great. Well, welcome, Craig. And if you could just give a little background on the program. Many members have been on before and heard, and we worked with the patrol on the program. So if you could give a little background for those who haven't been on, and then how it's going, if you have any stats at all. I mean, it hasn't been very busy, obviously, for the motor coach side of things for your on-road program with those 3 scales. So welcome and look forward to hearing.
Okay, morning. Yeah, so from the motor carrier safety program side, we conduct the terminal inspections as you talked about. We come out to your place of business and actually look at your vehicles and records to try to confirm compliance with minimum safety requirements. So we're mandated by law to conduct these inspections at least once every 13 months. And we've continued to schedule them even through the pandemic in deference to, because nobody knows when we're going to fire back up. If your industry, I know you've been down a little bit. If your industry is going to start back up, we wanted to be prepared for that. So we continue to contact people when they come due and try to schedule those inspections. We're going to come out and if you're not familiar, some of your folks aren't familiar with the process, our folks are going to come out to your facility. We're going to inspect buses. We'll do an inspection sampling of buses and driver's records, which will entail hours of service records and supporting documents. And then we'll look at the employer pull notice records to confirm that your drivers are enrolled in pull notice and they have current pull notices on file. And look at driver proficiency records. And then look at the maintenance records after we've looked at the vehicles, and really except for those vehicles we certified to run the SPAVs. We're really looking at the vehicles to determine the accuracy of the maintenance records. So we look at the maintenance records and they should reflect the vehicle condition. And if it's also the principal place of business, we'll look at your compliance with controlled substance and alcohol testing requirements. So there haven't been any real changes from our side. What we have done is we've asked them to implement CDC guidelines relative to physical distancing. We're using PPE when we come out. We've asked folks, I know historically when we've come out, and some terminal locations will sort of have a whole entourage of folks there from the motor carrier, depending on their specific areas of responsibility. We've tried to indicate to folks that that's not necessary. So in an effort to not try to put a bunch of people together in the same place all the time, we're capable of looking at this stuff without a ton of people that have to be right there. We have the capacity to inspect buses without a driver, which is what we do anyway. We do level 5 inspections. So we're fully capable of doing that. And we've tried to ask our folks, instead of entering the facility, to look at records. If the records can be provided to us, we can look at them in our vans, which the vans are set up as a rolling office anyway. So we're sort of designed for that, to try to keep physical distancing. Our folks should be using PPE, their masks, hand sanitizer. They're using disinfectant on their work areas. So we're trying to be cognizant of the transmission of the COVID virus, make sure we're not a part of that, try to make sure we comply with those guidelines. So it's one of the things that we've implemented. It's a little bit different, so that inspections might feel or look a little different when we do come out and conduct them. One thing of note is with the implementation of the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse from the FMCSA last January, our folks, we didn't start including that in our controlled substance and alcohol compliance inspection right away. But we have been since about July of last year. So we are going to be looking for clearinghouse compliance when we come out and conduct the inspections for the drivers that are subject to that requirement. So beyond that, there's not a lot of dramatic changes in the way we approach our program. I can share with you that we conducted a little over 1,900 tour bus terminal inspections last year in 2020. And we inspected about 440 tour buses, and we certified about 1,240 SPAVs. So those numbers are a little down, and we talked to your folks and indicated that if we contact you to conduct inspections, if they're not operating, what we talked about earlier this year at your meeting was that if you're not operating and we need to make you inactive, we understand and we can do that. And just when you get ready to activate again, you get ready to start running, you need to contact your local motor carrier safety and they can reactivate the carrier and terminals. And then that'll put you back in the queue for needing an inspection. So that's really it from our side.
Okay, Craig, could you give just a little update on the 3 weigh stations? Did you mention those?
I am going to defer that to Sergeant Kelly, David Kelly. So that's more on highway oriented. So we'll let him cover that.
All right. Hello, Sergeant.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Getting organized here just a second here. We have to switch positions here.
No problem. Welcome, welcome. So you're on highway in the headquarters on commercial section. And if you could just give a little background on the program that we worked for several years and talked back and forth with the patrol on, the CBA, the board, and we had members' involvement, and talk a little about the base of it and then how is it going in this last year.
Okay, yeah, certainly we have been, the buses have always been subject to the commercial inspection on highway, also through the weigh stations, through Section 2813 of California Vehicle Code, which gives us the authority to require inspections at those specific weigh station facilities, or as roadside inspections by mobile road enforcement officers, the guys in the pickup trucks that can set up lanes randomly anywhere in the state. Typically when we set up those lanes, we're looking for specific types of violations, or we're doing campaigns, such as the CVSA Operation Air Brake, some similar programs to that kind of stuff. But we are always looking for on-highway violations, regardless of fixed facilities, and of course the buses were always included in that. As far as the inspection program specific to the passenger vehicles, we have 3 facilities currently operating in that capacity. We have Gilroy northbound, Cordelia eastbound, and Mountain Pass on I-15 southbound. And those 3 facilities have signs placed specifically requiring buses to come in at those locations. The signs are posted at least a mile out, and the facilities have multiple signs, including the center divider, because as we know, a lot of the passenger vehicles do travel in the fast lane also. So we want to make sure that the drivers are aware that the facility specifically is requiring buses to stop as well. And then if they go into the facilities, the open facilities, they will be directed appropriately, very similar to any of the other commercial traffic that flows through there. There'll be a red light and a green light, and a loudspeaker to direct the driver to the appropriate location at the facility for the purpose of an inspection. Typically, we're selecting for unladen or buses, so no passengers typically is what they're doing the full inspections on. However, if there is observable violations such as flat tires or lighting violations or similar safety issues, then laden buses may be selected, and that's one of the reasons why we have it limited to the 3 facilities specifically is to accommodate passengers should there be an issue with the bus. We have all the facilities in place, including mitigation for COVID. And as you know, the volume of traffic for passenger vehicles has gone down substantially in the last year or so because of the COVID issues. But the facilities are prepared with PPE for the officers, personal protective equipment for the officers, including masks and gloves, sanitation, hand washing. We've asked, we try and keep the passengers on the bus, obviously, while the inspection is taking place, unless there's a mechanical deficiency that we need to offload and maybe perhaps switch buses. That's relatively rare, but it does happen from time to time. But in those cases, those facilities specifically have been chosen because they can accommodate the offloading of passengers in a safe location with services, food and drink, and bathroom facilities. Overall, the 3 facilities have been operating like this since about the middle of last year, so it's a little bit more than 6 months now. And like you said, the volumes have been diminished a little bit. We have been in the process of training all of our inspectors. Some of the inspectors had the passenger vehicle training prior to the program really getting kicked off, but our training has been impacted a little bit by the COVID as well. So we are still attempting to get a lot of our people trained up on the passenger specific inspection. But as far as that goes, our Gilroy facility has been really proactive about doing the industry outreach with the commercial industry education program. I know they've been working with some of the local carriers to ensure that the drivers are aware that these facilities are now inspecting buses regularly and expect the buses to come in. I would say that Mountain Pass also, especially with the ag station out toward the Las Vegas border or the Nevada border out there, it's a little easier for them because everything kind of goes through the ag inspection and the commercial facility. So the ag inspection will actually a lot of times let the facility know there's a bus coming through. Yeah. Cordelia is probably the one that is reporting the least amount of volume right now, and I guess they're still having not insignificant number of buses bypass the facility despite the signage. But that's not something necessarily that they're really hammering on just yet, but because it is still a relatively new program. However, I can see that through the educational process, again, trying to get the word out that, hey, buses are being selected at this facility potentially as well.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we've increased our training for personnel. We'd like to have them available, passenger trained personnel available 24 hours a day at these facilities. We've also purchased bus ramps to make it safer and easier for the inspections to occur should they need to go to the full level 1, which is the full undercarriage inspection. And beyond that, we're just trying to be pretty selective and really look for the blatant violations that everyone is concerned with, as is the industry. So we really are trying to minimize the impact to the operations while doing our job and hopefully minimizing the inconvenience to the passengers.
Well, good. Well, thank you for that, Captain. Just a few questions we want to get to. One, on the SPAB side, are there currently any extensions on SPAB school bus certificates due to COVID?
That's only going to be from the DMV. The department isn't in a position to give those extensions.
Okay. On let's see, is there any willingness outside the base location to do testing? This has come up before, and the question is if one division can allow the other division has some room, and somebody could go get a test over there, and then you could exchange back the official file that needs to be done on SPAB testing. Some divisions do it down in the Bay Area, but others seem reluctant.
Yeah, that's as an as needed, and that's going to be the commander's discretion, because the commanders are responsible for the school buses within their area. If there's an issue that you have, you can always contact me, and I can see if I can play intermediary in that. But that is a worst case scenario that you would go outside of your area, just because of the other factors that are involved in that.
Yeah, I know carriers, they move all over, and when there's like Sacramento to Truckee, for example, if there's nothing happening in Sacramento, it's hard because the person's on vacation or COVID leave or what have you to get up to Truckee. That may be the next possible. So if we could look at that, that would be helpful. I think we're just about there. I don't know if we have a couple other brief presentations, if you guys could hang on and see if there are other questions that pop up and look at the panel, that would be great. Vicki, are we just about there on time?
Yes, we are. Let's just give just a minute. Bronwyn is getting ready to open her screen.
Okay. While we're waiting for Bronwyn to come on for the next piece, wanted to thank the CHP. I think there are a couple other questions in the logs. Paper logs are acceptable to present time for very few jobs. We are doing since most operators are on the standby on their ELD software. Are paper logs acceptable? Since some operators are on standby with the software, their ELD software.
So for intrastate, we don't have the ELD mandate yet. So yes, paper logs for intrastate operations are still acceptable, but for interstate, the ELD mandate is in force.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And there's no exceptions to that, Sergeant?
No.
No. Okay. And is that a regulation, or is it in law, Sergeant? Do you know?
It's a federal regulation
I see. Okay.
for the electronic logging devices. And there are exceptions to the electronic logging devices depending on the type of operation for interstate. And as the captain was saying, that the intrastate does not require the electronic logging devices yet.
Okay, is there possible on the CHP side to give an additional year to licensure? Would you consider that if we had to do it, if we couldn't do it regulatory wise, if we had to do it legislatively, would you consider supporting that concept?
We would have to look at the concept and evaluate that. We couldn't give an answer on that right now, Mr. Pane.
Okay. It's one of the things we've thought of as we've been working through this. So, okay. Well, if you guys, if there's potential that you all at the CHP side could hang on and watch, I think, Vicki, the panelists can see the questions as well.
Mhm. Yes, they can.
Yeah. And then if we could watch and maybe compare notes on the side as we hear from the next presenter. Vicki, you want to, and thank you very much for the CHP's participation and our regards for the leadership there. Thank you.
Judge Bronwyn is having some technical difficulties. Her internet has frozen. I know we did a test earlier and everything was great, but she's having some trouble now. So you actually have time for some more questions if you would like.
Let me see if you guys can see these. Jasmine down in Fresno area, best tours. Will there be more dates available for SPAB test? Well, Jasmine, I think they covered that earlier. Each division is doing the best they can. In your area down in Fresno, they're only conduct them on a Friday once a week. Fridays historically are busier days in our industry of service. So Sergeant or Commander, I don't know who would like to handle that. That's an individual district.
Yeah, this is Sergeant Taylor. I mean, for an individual district, there is a area commander that's there that the people in that area that would like it moved or that type of thing can coordinate with that area commander and that school bus coordinator if that is a possibility. All
right. Well, maybe we'll get the area commander down in Fresno and we'll talk to him or on a separate call and with the SPAB officer to walk through that. So that would be great if we could get that contact information for the Fresno area. And then I think we might need it for other areas. Let's see, I renewed from Jenny Orr over in over on the Pleasanton side. I renewed my school bus certificate last year and the officer made an error on the date for expiration. How do I get this corrected? I sent an email to the officer, but did not receive a response yet. What's your best thought on that, Sergeant or Melanie?
Taylor.
Well, I'm not sure why the officer didn't respond. Generally, DMV, even though it's written in on your certificate with the wrong date, generally DMV does input the correct one. So all it would take is a phone call to DMV to verify that it indeed has 5 years. And if it doesn't, then the area officer that issued it can easily correct it.
All right, so we just have to get back to that area officer. It sounds like Jenny, and we can help facilitate that if necessary if we don't hear back. Sometimes I find in these emails you get so swamped with emails that it's hard to keep up with them all, but we'll assist with that, Jenny. Let's see. I think, let me just look. I see Charles Williams asking.
We've actually responded to those, Mr. Pane, on there, but we can elaborate on them as well. I'll go ahead and let Sergeant Kelly elaborate on that question about the 8 days ELDs.
Okay, good. I'm just reading it, trying to understand it, but thank you very much. So in all of this, as we've done in other Sacramento days, we really appreciate the CHP's attention to this. We've tried to, at times, grapple with the issue of the 8 divisions of the CHP and go down and meet with individual commanders in each of those divisions to talk through different issues. So we'll, at moments, coming up, we'll do that. Wanted to bring to your attention, a big issue for us right now is the Department of Motor Vehicle registration fees, the DMV IRPs. One concept we've floated to the administration, both DMV and CalSTA, the state agency that you're under as well, is just to extend, and we might do this legislatively, we've talked legislatively as well, but extend the registrations out to 2023. The easiest way we've thought of is just to allow that to happen through legislation and direct the CHP and the DMV to let enforcement, local and statewide, know that those tags on charter party carriers of this type are good until 2023. So we'll be talking to you further about that. And we're looking for the easiest way to make that happen. As you may know, registration fees were not used last year, or maybe you don't know, but carriers were 92 to 98, 99% down in business, off. So some carriers paid $3,000 to $4,000 for their registration for a single bus, and others with multiple buses paid up to $150,000. With no revenue coming in, you could well imagine the difficulty that's at hand with re-registering, let alone trying to capture and get restitution for those fees that were lost during this down period of COVID. So we're looking forward to continuing talking about that with the CHP and finding some way administratively or legislatively or both to assist these small family businesses in this way. And I think, Captain, we'll keep talking about that. I know that I've mentioned it to Captain Alvarez as well. I think he was going to be on for part of the presentation this morning.
Yeah, that is true. And you communicate with Captain Alvarez and he will communicate with us. And that's the only way we can go from there after we review the proposals when they come through.
Yeah,
we do understand the plight of these companies that you're talking about, and we understand that a lot of people are in this position, not just in the busing industry, but a lot of other industries, and things need to be done to help people through this tough time that we're going through, and we understand that, but we will report as it comes through with Captain Alvarez and the department, and weigh in on it when it comes to us.
Okay, well, we appreciate your sensitivity and understanding of it. So thank you very much. Thank you. We'll continue. I know that Captain Alvarez has gone back and forth, and I'm going to get together with him and just talk through the initial concept of that. I'm not sure if we're ready, Vicki, for Bronwyn, or she ever get in, or?
She is still having some technical difficulties with the computer, so we're going to ask you just to go ahead and move on a few minutes early to the DMV credit.
Okay, and you on the CHP side, you're welcome to stay and answer any of those questions. We have been talking with the governor's administration since last April through the California State Transportation Agency, the DMV, We've sent over letters to the CHP, keeping them informed. Most recently, we testified, CBA through Lisa Allen testified at the October tourism hearing in the Assembly. And in January, the president of the association sent another letter to the governor being very specific about the need for DMV IRP restitution for that loss. And the administration and the leadership of the legislature yesterday, and the legislature passed a couple of pieces of legislation that will be helpful to a certain extent for a variety of small businesses, those earning up to $2.5 million per year. And we sent that out to you yesterday once the legislation passed. And that will be $5,000, $15,000, and $25,000 grants. So you should check that out. We also will send a link out for the specific small business grant program that the governor had put in an emergency situation. Several of you had applied for those grants, but I hadn't heard that anyone had gotten them. And it is limited to those earning under 2.5 million in their companies per year. So with that, you may have all seen that, and we're looking at continuing our request to both the governor's administration and to the legislature for DMV IRP fees, credit or a waiver. The legislature also yesterday, in another piece of legislation, I think we sent this piece out to you on Friday, but they did pass it yesterday, giving 2-year fee waivers for the restaurant, bar, and beauty salon industries. Now, these fees, although much lower than vehicle registration fees for your commercial industry, they accomplish that feat. There are more of those companies, I think 59,000 ABC registrants, alcoholic beverage control registrants. But nonetheless, we're continuing beyond the $2 billion that the governor has appropriated, the legislature has appropriated, and the governor is expected to approve. In that bill, there's a specific reference to transit and ground transportation industry as a priority, and to the sightseeing touring transportation industry. So those two provisions are there, but it is capped at businesses of 2.5 million annual gross revenue. So that'll be helpful to many of you, but still those small companies that are above that revenue, it won't be helpful. But we still think there needs to be an aggressive campaign, as we started back in November, to the legislature. And what we're really looking for, you guys, is to find a Susan Collins, so to speak. Now, U.S. Senator Susan Collins was with 4 members of the Maine, the state of Maine Bus Association. I think there are 4 members in Maine. They all went to U.S. Senator Susan Collins, and she spearheaded the effort in the U.S. Senate and focused the attention. And then with the efforts of all of you around the country, and I think California had 4,000 pieces of correspondence to members of Congress, united over half of the members of the Congress to get behind the CERTS Act. So we're really looking for that same type of leadership in California, and we're looking for a Susan Collins right now. I've been on the phone with many of you, and if I haven't been on the phone with you, please call me. Those who have called have had direct conversations after emails with their members of the legislature. And we've had some success with chiefs of staff so far and explaining the unique situation that your small family businesses are in. The latest email I sent you last night tried to focus your attention for those who've already spoken to your members or your legislators' staffs, to try to focus the attention on thank you for the potential grant that I'll try to apply for if I'm under 2.5 million in revenue. But what we're talking about uniquely in this situation are fees that were paid last year and during this COVID that you haven't been able to use those registrations. So it's first a thank you to those staff people for that help on the potential for a grant. And then specifically the dire situation, the 95, 98% of the business that your companies are down. And that means to your families and your extended families, the employees. So I think that sums it up on what we're attempting to do. I can see if we can have one or two of you who've been active on that program. And we had people, Gary Buffo over in Napa immediately, the day before Thanksgiving, sent out a letter to his assembly member and senator urging support and help for this particular aspect. Sometimes we got back direct calls from members, senators to their member, and sometimes we just got back a form, well, we're looking at it and working on it. This is a point to make a relationship, and we have to try to think of this in a longer term, not only a relationship for now, but in 3 months, when we might be able to find someone to help spearhead this for us in the legislature, either on the Senate side or the Assembly side. So everyone is valuable. All conversations are valuable. I had a great conversation with Samantha and Santa Barbara Airbus day before yesterday with the chief of staff to Senator Scott Wilk down in the Santa Barbara Ventura area, who was very helpful and wanting to understand more so that they can understand the unique nature of what we're dealing with here. We have used the issue that Yosemite National Park has granted a credit for the next year for your commercial vehicle use fees. And that has gotten some attention, and we've suggested in prior emails that you use that. The main thing we've said in the president's letter, if you read that, and in some of your reiterations of that letter to your specific member, we've said airlines have given credits. In some of our conversations, every one of the carriers I've conversed with their member of the legislature, we've said, and member companies have said, we gave full refunds. There's just no way we can operate by giving credits. We gave refunds. And now all we're asking for is a credit of that amount of money moving forward for 2 years. And part of what we are talking about with the CHP on the side there, and we've talked about it with the DMV, is the concept of just making those tags good until 2023 or 2024. It's a loss of revenue, but when the state has appropriated $2 billion for small businesses, the concept we want to communicate is that those who paid fees and did not get usage from those fees should have the first piece of restitution. It just is fairness. And then we think it's fair, then we could compete on a grant basis with everyone else. So you've all seen the letter that's on your screen now. You have it in email, but would love to hear about any of those conversations directly from you. And I think that one thing that Thomas Miller brought up with Scott Wilkes, Chief of Staff yesterday, Senator Wilkes, Chief of Staff. Tom Miller is out of Antelope Valley Express. And Tom, the president of that company, said, his IRP account is being canceled if he doesn't re-up for 12 months. So we may want to have a conversation about that on right after this meeting. We're going to go into California Cruising, which is the open forum, talk about it. So we can talk through that specific issue, because we're going to get back with Senator Wilkes' staff, with Thomas Miller over at Antelope Express, and talk about that with the DMV. So we'd like to see if any others are having that same experience. I think that kind of rounds that out. We're going to continue to talk about that at the California Cruising portion. So Tom, I see you're on, and maybe you can bring that up and we can talk through that. Vicki, I'm not sure if there's other participants who have to get on and off. I know that the professor, David Kassenbaum, was going to have a short time frame, and we wanted to get him in from University of Vermont.
Yes, he is on the, I see that he's on. Oh, there you are, David. Welcome. So we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, a little out of sync, but if
Right.
Josh, is it all right then? Are you good if we go ahead?
Yeah,
and
I think
okay.
let's get the professor on. Yeah, Vicki, sure.
All right. Well, a screen share. Well, look at that, an old photo. I think I've yeah.
That's what you get when you don't send me new ones.
All good. I'm overdue. So I'm going to screen share now. I'm working from two monitors here, so I'm uncertain if you're going to see the main presentation or my slide view. Well, let's try.
Give me 1 second. Let me just make sure that you can share. 1 second.
Yeah.
Only host, all panelists, all panelists. Yeah. You should be able to share. Go ahead.
Okay.
So Michael, you might need to stop sharing for a moment. There we go.
Perfect.
All right. Great. So
Thank you. You go right ahead,
things
David.
around here, because honestly, with the way this is set up on my computer, it's.
And David, I know a lot of the
I think
people
we're
that are on
good.
this- I know a lot of the people that are on this call have met you either at the trade shows or you've been out to a lot of the facilities, people's operations in California. You just want to real quick give us the elevator pitch on how you got into this and what you're doing before you.
Sure. So yeah, I love being at CBA. I took a quick peruse through the participant list, and I believe I know at least half the people on the call. So for all of you, hello, thanks for having me. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dave Kestenbaum. I teach at the University of Vermont. My background is, well, my background includes work under sort of the broad umbrella of sustainable development, working with companies like Ben & Jerry's on sustainability initiative to small communities abroad. And early in my career, I cut my teeth doing tourism work, working with Disney, Hilton, Sheraton, going through management training for companies with those organizations. And I had a personal passion for environmental sustainability and took a small shift in my career. But a lot of my work has to do with the tourism sector and has had to do with the tourism sector over the years as well. And in about 2005, we started to think about how to green the tourism sector within the state of Vermont. And we started to wrap our heads around the idea that buses are the most environmentally friendly forms of motorized transportation on the road. So maybe we could promote green buses in the Green Mountain state of Vermont. That took on a bit of a life of its own, and we started a small scale certification program and research project that actually wound up having participants in 20 something states. And in 2012, we launched this certification for sustainable transportation program. And that program basically is a green labeling program for the passenger transportation sector. Operates a lot like Energy Star does for appliances, or let's say even organic certification for, the food sector. And buses were natural partners because you move people in an environmentally friendly manner. And then what wound up happening is we started to do a lot of efficiency work with operators, working on telematics data analysis, trainings for drivers around fuel efficient ways to drive and idle reduction, and things sort of took off. And so we're currently working with operators in 43 states, 4 Canadian provinces, Guam, and have trained a little over 10,000 drivers in some way, shape, or form over the years. So Vicki, is that a good overview elevator, you think, for old?
Yes. Yes, that's wonderful. And I just want to preface this by saying to people, we have known David Customon for years, and one of the biggest reasons we asked him to join us is because we've heard from a lot of the legislators that the bus industry is not green, it's not sustainable, it's not where we want to go. And even Kamala Harris has not been very supportive of the industry. So, and speaking with David and the Gang of 11, we've decided that we would like to go back to making sure that we're providing our members with the language and the tools and the resources to go back to talking about how green the industry is, resurrect that messaging with an updated where we are at today spin. And David's going to give us a taste of that today. And hopefully he'll be joining us at our annual convention in October.
Okay,
Okay,
that would be wonderful.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so Vicki's asked if I could share a few key points, around environmentally friendly transportation and how it relates to the motor coach industry. Today within 15 minutes. I have more slides than I'm going to use, but I have them in there just in case we wanted to zip back and forth to different things. But just to paint the picture, a lot of us don't talk environmental language every day. From a policy standpoint, California is looking, by 2020, was hoping to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions so they equal 1990 levels. They were pretty much on target with that, or you've been on target with that. And then there's this aspirational goal of by 2030 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall by about 40% below 1990 levels. And then by 2050 with SB 350 and combined with SB 32, the goal is basically to get below 80% of 1990 emissions by the year 2050. So that's, this big picture sort of look at what the state of California's goals. And, essentially, there's, different, looking at it from a sector standpoint, 41% of California's carbon emissions come from transportation, with 28% of that being passenger vehicles, and then 8% heavy duty. And I think probably, if you're like most other states, about half of that is going to come from heavy duty vehicles doing passenger transport, like transit vehicles and motor coaches. So transportation is this big source. And as you know, probably all too well as the operators, the policymakers are looking to figure out what in the world can we do to reduce emissions in the sector, right? And at the end of the day, there are different ways to improve efficiency within transportation. Avoiding trips, modal shifts, getting people out of their single occupancy vehicles into buses, or having them, take a bike or walk. New efficient vehicles, new technologies, low carbon fuels, less congestion on the roadways. There's all sorts of neat research that comes out that basically said that your vehicles are more efficient when they're, moving at higher speeds versus in stop and go traffic, right? So less congestion, consumer and driver education programs as well. And at the end of the day, the big moral of the story is from transportation sector, if they can do all these things and also reduce pollution per unit of production or consumption, or reduce pollution per vehicle mile traveled or passenger mile, well, you should be able to get there. And the goal is really, like you saw from those previous slides, California wants to reduce those emissions by, by 80% or 80 to 100% by the year 2050. And, in policy language, the policymakers, what I often find is that's the language they speak. They speak jobs, of course, they speak their constituency, but in the policy, you're going to continue to go back to this idea of a percentage reduction by a certain amount, by a certain date. And it lines up with all sorts of other research, and you see this happening. And in California, what's happened in transportation is, for the most part, heavy duty vehicles have remained flat on road. The heavy duties, on-road passenger vehicles, their emission levels have remained pretty flat, even with your increasing population in California. And that is attributed a lot to the shift towards biofuels. That's one of the ways you were able to do it in heavy duty vehicles. And in passenger transport, you had a dip for a while, but you actually increased the carbon a little bit. And those are for light duty transportation vehicles. And the reason being is increased population. So your vehicle efficiency improved, but because of your increased population and more people traveling, what ended up happening is you had a slight bump. And so, in California, you got all these goals. If I was talking to policymakers out there, I would talk about, SB 2514 and maybe electrification of buses. The bus companies can start helping store electricity, because if you charge an electric bus overnight, the grid could dip into it and you can make money maybe storing that electricity. And then you've got these other plans where buses can contribute rather than be the problem that a lot of people perceive them being. So I think just with the proper messaging, you can get there. And here I want to get into really what I think is like the real win for you, right? Like this is, when I'm thinking about, policymakers and people working in the environmental field and activists and scientists working within this realm, they love numbers, sometimes there's this weird Machiavellian sort of, kick that folks are on, are trying to pick winners and losers, but oftentimes, the numbers speak to folks. And this chart I pulled out from some of the research done by Caltrans and CARB, and it shows the carbon. If you look to the column, really that's all the way to the right where it says grams of CO2 per passenger mile, right? At the end of the day, they're looking to move people 80-something% more efficiently by the year 2050. And single occupancy vehicles, and what I'll say is this chart, it's using from the extraction of the fuel out of the ground to the distribution of the fuel, and then the tailpipe emissions. So it's a really comprehensive footprint. And what you can see is that, your single occupancy vehicles are higher, the gasoline ones, but as soon as you hit electricity, you're reducing that impact by about 20%. Well, buses, even though you may not get, they did work on transit vehicles for this research, but they never did work on motor coaches. But your numbers look pretty similar to what you see there for 80% occupied transit buses, where your impact, actually does a little better than that. So what I want to do is do a quick exercise. I'm wondering if an operator from the audience might be able to just one operator. Can one operator tell me what their estimated average MPG is on their fleet?
And we'll just have them drop that in the chat.
Sure. And I don't know if I can see the chat the way this is set up, and I almost don't want to risk it.
So let me just watch it for you.
Yeah.
There's a question that's popped in here. David says, do you have the data? Well, we're waiting for somebody to drop in their information. Oh, here I see Ginny Orr says 5 to 6, Kevin Creighton 7.5, Eric Lee 6 to 6.5 miles per gallon. Is that
Okay, I'm going to
information you're
use
looking
6
for?
as a multiplier. So every gallon of diesel fuel has 10,000, produces 10,180 grams of carbon dioxide when it's burned. If you divide that by 6, well, you get it per mile driven in a motor coach, essentially. If you're getting 6 miles a gallon, it's like 1,696 grams per mile. Can someone tell me, one of those operators, what's your average passenger load on a vehicle? How many people are in a vehicle at one time?
And again, I'll watch the chat.
Yeah.
And while we're waiting for somebody to drop that answer in, there's a question for you to answer later. Do you have the
Sure.
data for transit bus, van pool? I'm assuming they mean van pool, tour vehicles to be run on renewable diesel or renewable bio blend? That's a question for later. And the answers to your question, I have Michael Giddens saying 37, Eric Lee saying today, less than 25 pre-COVID was 40.
Okay. I'm going to go with Michael's 37. Let's go with the pre-COVID numbers, keeping our fingers crossed.
Being
Maybe
positive.
advertise getting on buses because we all need to get back together post-COVID. But essentially what that turns into, with an average passenger load of 37, average MPG of 36, you're moving people of grams of CO2 per passenger mile at about 45 grams of CO2 per passenger mile. So if you put motor coaches in there running in regular diesel, not on biodiesel or anywhere else, the good old fashioned evil old school diesel, right? It is an amazing improvement in efficiency. And in fact, the only option that's in here that comes close to that is electric light rail. Or is it I think it's a passenger rail with renewable diesel. And so I want you to hold on to that and think about how much of an improvement in efficiency that is. And I'm going to jump to this next slide. And this next slide, what I put up was, this is an estimate of single occupancy vehicles in California had an average of 411 grams of CO2. On average in the US, if we combine people traveling, a butt in the seat, whether it's a train, a bus, a transit vehicle, a motor coach, or their car, on average, we're moving people at about 274. ABA says it's about 38 grams for most private motor coach operators. And our exercise today just showed it's around 45, right? And so for me, the really big lesson for this, and I was going to be running around to policymakers, is telling the story that motor coaches are a 2050 solution today. And maybe even more powerful than that is California releases, you know this better than I do, hopefully, the California Transportation Plan every 5 or 6 years. The new one, they had a 2040 plan in 2016. They have a draft plan that's out, and hopefully in the next few weeks, this final plan is coming out for 2050. Mm-hmm. The latest draft plan that was open for comments from says basically has these goals: safety, climate, equity, accessibility, quality of life, economy, and the environment. If you went through a checklist with a policymaker, you could probably make a crazy good case for motor coaches in every single one of these, with every single one of these bubbles. And the transportation plans basically says those are the goals, but this is the way they're going to do it. And on this slide, I basically just decided to circle out where I think the motor coach industry could fit in and make a cool lobbying case for, fitting into that 2050 plan. Because, well, not everyone can afford a brand new Tesla. We're not transitioning to all electric buses anytime soon. So if we want to make it safe, equitable, and affordable and address all these issues, well, you still have the 2050 solution today with motor coaches. And so I don't know, just knowing the research on human behavior and how you get people to change minds, because most people like to tend to believe what they want to believe, and it's hard to get them to change. So that's the traveling public, but also policymakers. And so, my suggestion is get that message out there, make it impossible to ignore, let them know that buses operate in an environmentally friendly way. They're affordable, they provide accessibility, they get people out of SOVs, and it helps the system operate more efficiency because there's less congestion on the road. And also tell the story that the sector's open to change and already doing really cool stuff, and not just comfortable sitting on its laurels, right? What you really have now is you have an industry that's producing electric vehicles that's out there. You have operators here that I've worked with that are just looking to, maybe not everyone from an environmental standpoint, but looking to train drivers to be more environmentally friendly and more fuel efficient. And you're doing it already through eco-driver training, through idle training, through your telematics, et cetera. And just shout out that you don't want to be left out. You're a tool to help. And so, wave your flag on certifications, on your education programs, and everything else you can do, at your company. And just remember, when people choose how to travel, they choose by price, safety, convenience, travel time, and environmental values. And if you can get that out to everyone, I think you can make a case how motor coaches can be more mainstream. So Vicki, that's it. I'm not sure how I did for time. I think I'm close.
Yeah.
So
And I
I'll
know
wrap
Josh
up
was-
and just
Josh
ask
is
anybody questions.
Yeah, Josh has raised his hand that he has a question, but I do want to say first that David and I are going to be working together and try to put together, as part of this Gang of 11 suggestion, tools that we can put together for our California operators to use in messaging. We'll put together, I'm going to work on a California toolkit to help, and we'll be working on that in the coming weeks. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, we're inviting David to come and join us at the convention. And David, I don't know if you're available, but we have it, once we get through a couple more topics with Josh, we do have the California Cruising After where people can ask questions. Are you available to stay and answer questions during that?
I am.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do right now is figure out how to release the screen share. So
Okay, well,
Before
I
you-
think I can do that. And Josh, why don't you go ahead and
Before you
I'll
release the screen share, I'd
Oh.
like you just to go back. I got to the piece of the equation. Your in was 45 grams per passenger
mile.
per mile. So what did you do? You did the division to 6. We took 6, and then maybe you could just go back through that calculation.
Yeah. So, you got 10,180 grams of carbon dioxide that's produced from a gallon of traditional diesel, petroleum diesel, right?
Yeah.
If you get 6 miles a gallon in a vehicle,
Okay.
figure out first, all right, how many grams of CO2 you're producing to travel 1 mile, a butt in a seat. You're moving, the utility you get out of transportation is moving a person from A to B. So how much carbon are you doing for a mile? Because you got something, I think, like 341 vehicle miles traveled in California last year. So I want to know, how do we improve how you move people from A to B? So I just broke it down, divided by 6. And then if that's just to move the bus, that's the cost of moving the bus from a carbon standpoint. But then if you have 37 people on that vehicle at one time, you're all sharing in the load. It's in the aggregate. So we all have a share of that as opposed to being one person in a car. And so when it comes down to it, I mean, those are the numbers, that's the math. It's hard to argue with that. And so when
if you could
Yeah.
put back up on the screen the different
will we be able to share some of these slides? Could you put a little package of things that we could share with the attendees? And I'm
Yeah,
gonna do a
sure.
follow-up email and I'll include it too.
What I'll do is I'll put together PDF. I'll save these as a PDF and I'll email them to you, Vicki.
Perfect. And
Yeah.
then, yeah.
I'm always hesitant to go into too much math on a meeting like this because
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
a
okay.
math person.
Are you able to reshare your screen, David?
I can, yeah.
That'd be great.
so that chart, I wanted to go back to that chart because it went by quickly, where it shows everything, and then we got to 45 grams per passenger per mile. And then how do you relate that to the chart so that we can all see? This is important. We put in our letter, by the way, while you're doing that, we put in several of these letters. And oh, by the way, Senator, I could tell you about the environmental, the good environmental piece we're doing by removing 56 cars from the road. And so this is very important so that we can start plugging this into our letter, compare one to the other. A single car, if it's 45 grams per passenger per mile on a motor coach, a single occupancy vehicle is, I think it says
492. Can you see that now?
So
Yeah.
we're basically at that calculation, the motor coach industry is basically just 10% of, if I'm reading, that's 492 for a single occupant vehicle. If I'm one person in a car, 492 grams
Per passenger mile.
per passenger mile. And the calculation we just did was 45 grams per passenger mile.
Exactly. Now, what's going to happen is California's changing stuff and you've got more electric coming out. So you're going to start getting squeezed if the industry doesn't change along with it. But right now, you are light years ahead of everyone else.
And this, you're
Might
absolutely
be
right. Yeah.
more powerful right here is on average, this is an estimate here, right? But on average, you're about 274 of moving people from point to point, not just the single occupancy cars.
Now,
If
what does
38
that mean on average between what and what?
Oh, so this is, if, not every trip is taken in a single occupancy vehicle. Some are in transit vehicles. Some people are carpooling, some in a bus. So if we even it out and balance it out, this is about how much carbon dioxide it takes to move a person, a butt in a seat from A to B 1 mile. Motor coaches, you're probably in the mid 30s to 50.
Mhm.
Unless you're running empty buses. That brings you in right here, buses 86% more efficient than the 274.
Yeah. Now, as we're going to get, and maybe if you could join us next week to hear the CARB presentation, and this is a little advanced, save the date for everyone for next week if you haven't, but we're going to have the chief of the advanced technology section, who we've worked with for several years, Tony Brazil, on. And then there'll also be the enforcement folks on, but Tony, in fact, that same day, March 2nd, in the evening at 5 o'clock, CARB is doing its workshop on this advanced technology piece, which is basically zero emissions. And so it would be great if you have some time to get on to listen to Tony, because that would be helpful to us, I think, for your knowledge base to hear that.
If my schedule allows, I would love to be there.
All right. Well, it's next March 2nd at 9:15, Vicki.
I'll send David the information. I know you forwarded it out. I'll send it to David so he can register. If
Yeah.
the
So
schedule allows.
it's been, the truck and bus rule, the CARB truck and bus rule has been somewhat traumatic. And now with losing a year plus, it's been even more traumatic for folks because people bought the new vehicles to comply with the rule to get us to 2023, which we had negotiated. I think Jim Seaton is on from Sundance, and Jim was one of the main, with Dan Eisentrigger and others on the board at that time back in 2008, 2009, to negotiate that and to get CARB to understand that buses are completely different than a truck. And these heavy duty vehicles are completely different from age, they wear out, from travel miles per year, all of that. So It's been somewhat traumatic, to say the least. And then to have the debt on these new vehicles, and then for CARB to start talking about zero emissions by 2045, it gets maddening at times. So we appreciate your perspective.
Yes, thank you very much, David. So if you can, please stay on for the California Cruising. There's several questions in the chat that I know we would love to have a chance to run by you if you're available to. And then I think all we have left is it's really it's you, Josh, talking about updates on SB 87. And then we just have some quick reminders for everybody. And then we're into California Cruising.
Well, thank you, Vicki. I've talked about 87 in the previous presentation with the DMV. We can talk about it some more. There was one question I answered about what tax year are they proposing to use in the new legislation, and that's the 2019 taxable year, as it says in each of the A, B, and C. So, and remember, once again, on this, we appreciate the legislatures doing this, but we're talking about our unique situation. And the more unique we can make it individually for people, the better off we're going to be. So we're looking for 1 or 2 or 3 legislators out of 120 to get this in the works. We've been talking about the budget, and so we'll continue on that road. And I think we should, any housekeeping, Vicki, and then we should move into California Cruising.
Okay, can you move the slide along one more time for me, Michael? All right, so that was the session for today. And just want to remind you that on Tuesday, March 2nd from 10 a.m., so we started an hour later, 10 a.m. to noon Pacific, we'll be talking about the best practices of securing federal support and how we can help at the federal level. So Peter Pantuso from ABA and Ken Presley from UMA will be joining us and giving us updates. And then we'll have Tony Brazil and Randy Rondo, for, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, come and join us and speak about CARB, as Josh was saying. And that's, the CARB is a chunky topic that really deserves most of its time. We were unable to have Bronwyn Wilson join us today. It turns out that her laptop crashed just as she was about to rejoin. She'd been on for a practice in the morning and everything worked fine. And then all of a sudden it all went kerflooey. So, and we can go ahead and that's the end of the normal scheduled presentation for today, but we will go right into California Cruising, which is just our opportunity to answer remaining questions in the chat. Anything else you'd like to follow up on, we will stay on, at least for the next hour if you need. So
maybe we should have the voice of America and the California Bus Association bring us into California Cruising.
If we could, except that the attendees are unable to speak. So they've got the chat.
It's
and I think
for California Cruising, brought to you by California Bus Association. It's open mic time. Well, actually, you could type it out. But welcome to the first ever California Cruising. Thanks, Vicki.
Let me see if I can, in my audio settings, if I can get everybody to be able to speak. I don't think that I can, but let's give it a try.
If you'd like to speak, you can go ahead and raise your hand. We can unmute you one at a time.
Okay, all right, great. Then I'm going to pull up the attendees. This is perfect.
Yeah,
so I think, David, if you want to go ahead and put your screen back on, we do still have these couple of last questions that are on here from, so Jenny Orat tried to ask a couple times, and I don't want to ignore her question. Does the calculation, forgive me if you've answered this, does the calculation for electric vehicles include the generation of the electricity as you do for the generation of diesel?
Supposedly, yes. The research that I cited was from CARB, and it says it's for the production, distribution, and consumption of all the energy there, including electric. And I would say if I had to project out, you would probably going to see those numbers drop because of the clean energy rule California has of slowly phasing out carbon intensive forms of electricity.
Okay, and there was the one other question that I had run by you, but I don't think you got a chance to address this one. It was, do you have, and David, this is again for you. Do you have the data for transit bus, van pool, tour vehicles to be, oh, I think it is van pool, tour vehicles to be run on renewable diesel or renewable bio blend?
I don't have that data actively. However, it's pretty easy to glean. You could just take those numbers and just switch the multiplier a little bit. But as soon as from biodiesel B20, you can almost reduce it by about 20%. It would probably take about a half hour if we really wanted to get into it for me to do some math on the back end someplace and get more accurate numbers if you'd like.
A follow-up from Ginny is, how is the electricity generated then?
Oh, it depends. It's, there are different power pools in the United States, like pods where the grid, like every state in the country except for Texas really is attached to the national grid systems, and we have power pools. So in Vermont, we contract with the local providers, but there's a Northeast power pool. It's almost like this bathtub where all the energy comes in, and like different drain plugs that go out and send the electricity. So it is all blended. And California, I think you might be divided up into a couple of different power pools. I haven't looked at that in a while, but you have a whole blend of electricity, but you also have, you have a renewable portfolio standard in California that's coming out, and it's like 33% of electricity by 2020 is supposed to be from renewable sources, and by 2030 it's a shift to 60% of total electricity by 2030 is supposed to come from renewables, and I think 100% by 2050. And so then you probably have a shift to more solar, more wind, and slowly pulling away from coal burning power plants and anything that's carbon intensive. So not the perfect answer, but you've got this trend of shift that's happening.
Thank you. Any other questions in the?
I see we still have a couple of Captain Arnold Hardy's on the CHP. Did we miss any questions? I think we had Robert Jones said the Gilroy facility is very professional and impressive operation. I've heard that from other carriers. And Gilroy even called and reached out, as you mentioned, reached out to a carrier. I think all the carriers to say, come on by, even offered to do their inspection, their annual inspection. So very good working relationship, what's going down in Gilroy. Thank you, Robert, for making that compliment to the CHP. Tom Giddens looks like couldn't see that they put on the mountain pass for the CHP. Couldn't do we go with trucks at the mountain pass, because I've seen long backup on truck side. CHP, I don't know if someone would like to try that. As I remember it, what you were talking about doing was just having buses roll through and not stop unless they were unladen. But laden coaches would just roll through. Anybody on the CHP want to take something on that?
Yeah, this is Sergeant Tully. Typically, the traffic management is kind of handled at the specific location. So if there is an issue with trucks backing up, they're going to try and manage that traffic flow a little better. And that also has to do with the selection of the vehicles. So depending on how their traffic flows and the time of day, you may be directed at different locations within the facility. I can't speak exactly to how they run the traffic flow out there, but that's my assumption. And most of the facilities are operated that way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Captain. To answer that question, I think he's asking if the laden buses for the en route bus inspection program get to just pass by while the unladen ones have to pull in. They all have to pull in, We just don't necessarily are going to stop the laden ones unless we see an obvious violation.
Yeah.
I do want to just, if I can interrupt for a second, just say that I have unmuted everyone so you can ask your questions directly. I just ask you please raise your hand so you're not talking over each other, but I have unmuted the group and allowed everybody to talk so you can, or allowed you to be able to unmute so that you can ask questions directly if you'd like.
Any questions or any comments on what all we're doing on the legislative contact side? Any new contacts that I should know about or Donna should know about? All right, there may be some. Thomas Miller, do you want to talk about your experience with DMV and see, because we'll get Senator Scott Wilk's staff back on the line and get DMV on the line over that. But I think Mike had put something in the chat. Thomas, did you want to say a little something on that? I think you may have.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear.
I don't know why my picture doesn't really come up, but anyway, if you can hear me, that's probably the main part. You don't want to see me anyway. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. My experience over there was I've got a driver who got his test and he failed the test after his first go around with the DMV and it's probably been 8 months now. And there's only one guy up here that does the certification. So he has not been able to be at his office very often, sometimes out 3 months at a time. So I'll bet it's about 8 months, 9 months that this guy's trying to get his SPAB certificate. I understand they got so backlogged and they couldn't really get enough people in a room that the Antelope Valley School Transportation Agency offered their bigger area to do their classes, and they were able to get people in groups through there a little bit better, just because they're so backlogged. But the guy needs some help up there. A lot of these drivers that we had, I don't know about everybody else, they can only wait out so long. I get a little help from the school agency up there. When the trainer comes in, I don't have my own trainer, so they come in and help. And it would be almost nice at some point if we could maybe even do a Zoom and get accredited, maybe with as part of the California Bus Association, maybe where we all would pay a trainer to sit in, but it wouldn't all have to be in our offices, especially now in the COVID era. Maybe it's better to have maybe 4 or 5 of my drivers who need SPAB certificates or training hours sitting in on a Zoom meeting with a certified trainer, and maybe we all pay a little bit into it rather than paying for one trainer to come in for 2 or 3 people. Just a thought on that. But really trying to get these drivers SPAB certified. We don't want to make it difficult on them, otherwise they don't even want to do it at all. And it's kind of gotten to that point where it's really hard to keep people certified and to keep that going. So anything we could do to speed the process and make it less difficult for the people, that'd be great.
I know Vicki Cole is the chair of our SPAB committee, and she is certified herself. And I think she's certified as an instructor as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So I know she's on the call, but she's actually just listening. She's on a tour right now, lucky Vicki, and with some guests. So I'll make sure that we follow back up with her and see if something like that can be arranged, if that's even possible, and make sure that I circle back around to you and to the group to let you know.
And then Thomas, could you talk a little about, and I assume the 8 to 9 months, that was a combination of the training, it sounds like, and the CHP.
No, he's ready to go. He took the test and he failed the first go around, the drive test. He has his, I believe it was like 20 hours, he has his 10 hours behind the wheel and 10 hours or 15, whatever it was for his training. So I'm talking about just trying to get behind the wheel to try to pass that drive test.
So that may, I'm just trying to understand the 8 to 9 months you mentioned.
Yes, that's what it's been, 8 to 9 months to get a drive test.
Hmm.
That's
right.
the problem. The guy's got his hours in and his behind the wheel hours, and he failed at the first go around. Now just trying to get back in and do it. I mean, the guy's been out for 3 months at a time, and then he's out again, and it's just it's an ongoing process.
Oh, you're talking about the CHP
The
officer in
CHP
charge?
officer who does the training. Yes.
I see. Well, maybe we can talk to headquarters about that. We can figure out the commander down there, maybe CHP sergeant, or maybe you and I could talk offline and see what else we can do to help. Is there anything nearby, Thomas? Another division nearby that could be helpful?
I suppose they could try down in Santa Clarita, but it's all, it seems to be the, with the COVID thing going on, it really slowed things down. But still, when we come back into this, it's only going to get worse when the schools open up, because everybody's going to try to get in, and right now is really a good time to probably try to get some of these people through, because they're just kind of waiting. But the backlog for this one inspector is just probably so big that he can't get to everybody. And he's doing all the schools. The Antelope Valley School Transportation Agency up here is a pretty good size school agency, and they probably have a lot of people that they send through. So, we do, that's our biggest customer, actually. So we would like to get a little more attention and get some of these drivers through faster than, and we actually work pretty well with the agency there with their trainer coming over helping us.
Oh, good. Well, let's see on the CHP side if we can have some continuing conversations on that, and see how we could possibly help. I mean, ultimately, as the governor pushes to have schools back in, then this is going to be another crisis situation. So we either try to get ahead of it, or because if school districts and the private companies don't have school bus drivers ready to go, then we're going to have a crisis on the scene. So, and I'm sure the governor would like to avoid that. We all would like to avoid that, I'm sure, in the CHP as well. So, Sergeant, maybe we can talk further and see if there's other things we can do to help the whole situation, because I assume it's going to be other places around the state too. So.
This is Mulaney Boyack.
Hey,
I was
Mulaney.
just, I was listening, and I believe that would be my department. So if you have something you want to discuss with me, I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Okay, well, maybe you could shoot me an email off of the emails that the captain has had, and we could connect.
Sure, sounds great.
See. And I know you're, every division has their own responsibilities. But maybe we could think through how else we can help, because ultimately, as the governor keeps pushing, he wants kids back in schools. We all want kids back in schools, but we got to have some way to get them to school too. So
absolutely,
would appreciate that. Other questions, other ideas? Oh, well, Thomas, before you wanted to, I wanted you just to mention what we talked about with Senator Scott's chief of staff on the DMV, and because I saw a point that Mike Waters made that, yeah, everybody's going to be under that. And that's the question of, if you didn't have any out-of-state travel, IRP won't register your coaches?
Correct. I've been going around with the IRP, just trying to get credits, see if there's going to be credits. I've probably called them 4 or 5 times and tried to run up the ladder. And it's going to take a legislative process to ever get a credit. So I realize that. But I was going to take a couple of vehicles and I was going to register them. And we didn't have any out-of-state miles. And they go, well, if you don't have any out-of-state miles, we can't do an IRP. I says, well, then you're going to have a lot of the bus industry that isn't going to be able to register vehicles IRP because most of our fleets are parked. And they said, well, that's the way it is. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay, well, then send it in anyway, and we'll see what we can do. So my registration on those vehicles was due January 31st. I send the 2 vehicles that I wanted to get registered information in, explained the situation, did a statement of facts. I'll included that with it, saying that we didn't go out of miles due to the pandemic, or out of state miles because of the pandemic, but I'd still like to register these IRP. And they came back and said, there's nothing we can do. You're going to have to register them in California, 100%. I didn't have a problem with that until I found out that I need to get a copy of the title. And a matter of fact, the IRP was pretty misinformed on the whole deal. The people there said, if you're not going to register the vehicle, you need to go get a non-op on them. Otherwise, you're going to have penalties. So while I wasted 3.5 hours at the local DMV here, they told me you can't do you can't do a non-op on it, planned non-op, because they were never registered in the state of California. They were IRP, and that's 2 different things. Therefore, you cannot do a non-op on it because we don't have any record of the title. It was probably electronic title. It was never registered in the state, blah, blah, blah. And so don't even plan on doing a non-op. And that wasn't possible. Then I said, well, I'll just register it in the state of 100% in California. Well, we need a copy of the title. So now I'm going to the finance company trying to get a copy of the paper title and requesting a copy of that. I got one of them so far. And then I can go to the DMV and register it 100% in California. And then they'll take the title and do electronic title with it. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't get anything done. I'm still trying to get the registration. If I get the title, I'm concerned that maybe on some of the other buses I want to get the titles in my hand. That way, when I'm ready, I can go into the DMV and don't have to wait to get a paper title mailed to me and then go through the process. But going to the local DMV, they don't know anything about IRP. They're telling me I got to have a title in hand. And then I'm concerned about, if I get a title, is there going to be late fees? Because now it shows that do I have 10 days to register it? Haven't even got into it with the DMV on that one yet. But if let's say a couple of these vehicles I don't want to register right now, I register them when I need them, and I want to get the title, paper title in my hand now. If it says California, do I have 10 days to register it? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get back on the phone with Senator Wilkes' staff, David, if we could, after noon today. I think I have his mobile number now, and we can talk through and see if we can get his help to go directly to DMV. Anybody else? I think Mike made a comment on this. Anybody else on this? I can't see who's raising their hands, but
no. 1 second.
Okay.
Go over here.
Well,
oh yeah, no, I thought maybe I was muted. No, I don't. Oh, I see Tom Giddens just saying, I don't believe you can do a partial year on an IRP plated bus. And Ginny is asking, do you have to pay the use tax when you register in California?
I guess that's a question. Anybody else can answer that out there?
This is Kevin. We used to, in days past, we used to take our older buses and park them. They were non-IRP plates. We'd park them from like November through March, and then we do partial year registration with DMV. We had to pay the full VLF and the weight fee, and then we paid, so much per month of using them. So we'd pay the partial year, but they were non-IRP plates.
Kevin, can I ask you a question regarding that? Was it less expensive to do it that way than to register them as IRP?
Yeah, but not, well, you didn't have to come up with all that money. It used to be December 31st, come up with all that. So we took the IRP plates off our MC9s and 102s that we didn't use for interstate anyhow, and got the partial year registration on them. But that's a moot point now because they're all, CARB kind of killed all those moneymaker buses.
And anyone know about the use tax Jenny has asked about?
That's when you purchase your vehicle, not when you're looking for.
That's just upon purchase, huh, Kevin?
Right. Yeah. Basically, the first and primary use within the first 6 months is primarily for interstate commerce. So that's when you first bring it in and register it under, your IRP, that kind of stuff. That's for your state board of state board. Is that the sales tax, or that's the use tax, isn't it? Same thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the first and primary, use in the first 90 days is within. But if you're just looking to get, a copy of the title.
Okay.
Vicky Cole and Terry Hayes have their hands raised that they'd like to ask a question. So can I call on Vicky Cole first, please, if that's okay? So Vicky, can you go ahead and unmute yourself? How about you? Oh, she's gone.
I did not raise my hand.
Oh, okay. It's just I have under raised hands. Okay, Josh, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think I'd like to I'm looking at the screen now, seeing who's on. Rich Dorr, thank you. Rich Dorr, want to say that we're still talking back and forth with Senator Caballero's staff. She was a leader on the $2 billion. It was her bill, as you can see. And so if you talk to them before me, we really need to focus on how unique your situation is, correct?
Yeah, I'm still reaching out to her, as well as Kate Daniels and Senator John Laird's office too. So both seem pretty interested in helping us out. It's just right now we're in a phone tag situation last couple of days, even over the weekend. So still pursuing that though.
Good. And I know Discovery, or not Discovery, Pacific Monarch down there is reaching out to Laird, Senator Laird. So that's good. Jim Seaton, Senator Ben Wessos was one of the first, your senator, to respond. We're still talking back and forth. And so really appreciate your continual connection with them. I know I've copied you on a couple things. Have you heard back anything from them yet since?
No, I have not heard anything back since our last conversations.
All right, well, keep me posted if you hear anything. Would appreciate that. And then Thomas Miller, we'll get back to Senator Wilk's office. Jasmine, anything down in the Valley? You hear back from the governor's Central Valley representative or your members?
I'm working right now trying to get through Borges and Jim Patterson. Jim Patterson has had a very interesting take with DMV and so on in the past. So I'm really working that circuit, hopefully trying to get something positive where he could perhaps, take on this issue that we're having. As far as the liaison's office, they changed staff. So just when we got into a really good, comfortable area with them and being able to communicate with them as open as we were, I'm right back to square one, just trying to bridge that and network with them. I do have a question, Josh, regarding the SB 87. I noticed in the terminology where it says that it goes based on the 2019 revenue.
Yeah.
And so if in businesses that made over the cap, what happens there? Is the cap only at the 25,000? So if you made
Yeah,
more than
that-
5 million,
Yeah, if you're over, the analysis I pasted in says grants amount scale with annual gross revenue, and then over 1 million, but it does seem to cap at 2.5 million in gross revenue. So you got to be under 2.5 million in gross revenue in 2019.
so businesses that were over 2.5 million in 2019 cannot get any part of that.
Would not be eligible for this grant. They made a call at what levels they wanted to help fund. So I know many companies are over that. Many companies are under it as well, but that's why we need to keep focused on the issue of this is a unique situation. You've paid your fees. You're not asking for just a grant. And in the case where this legislation will not have any effect on you, if you're over 2.5 million in 2019 gross revenues, that should be a point. But that's what I want us to make is the distinction between just a grant, you're giving out money in these categories, and a restitution, so to speak, of fees you've paid without getting anything for it. So, yeah.
I just want to say, Tom Giddens has his hand up. Tom, did you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Well, I was just going to respond. I'm a little curious on Tom's problem because the mileage, like our IRP ends at the end of this month. So it's a March 1st renewal. And our mileage had to come from July 19 to June 20. So most of us shut down like March 13th, I'll say. So you should have some hopefully interstate mileage in that time. It may not be much, but you should have some. So I'd be surprised if your mileage shouldn't be 100% during COVID right now for any renewals.
I'm just going to ask for David Kesterman. Are there any other questions for David so we can let him move on?
What's his favorite scotch?
Oh, you're muted, David.
David, was that Redbreast or was that Angel's Envy? You're muted, David.
There you
Yeah,
are.
I was taking myself off scotch. I was thinking of a good old fashioned, I love Connemara whiskey from Ireland, but it's not a scotch. It's related, but I'll go for a good old Glenmorangie or yeah.
What is that from?
Connemara, very peat heavy scotch.
Oh boy, Connemara. I'm gonna have to ask my whiskey friends about Connemara.
All right, nice.
One Connemara.
Kevin, I won't complain.
David, I was gonna say maybe
older than 12 years old.
Oh, look at Michael.
David, maybe we should talk about the programs that are available for the operators real quick.
Sure, if you'd like.
Let me just see if there's anything for the CHP. If I think I saw them just on. If they're still on. Anything else you all for the CHP or any other questions for now?
No, Mr. Piley, we are good. We just want to thank you for allowing us to be part of this today and let you know that we're here to work with you as best we can. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Anybody on this call, you can contact us at 916-843-3400 with any questions.
Okay. Hey, thank you very much to the CHP.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You guys and gals. Bye-bye.
Go ahead,
So,
David.
yeah, if you'd like, I could share some information. Michael, thanks for sharing props. I just since you dug up some, I dug some up as well. Yeah, essentially, if operators who are on the line are interested, we do work with, a good 5 to 10 companies, big operators in your state. We'd love to work with some more, re-engage folks who we haven't worked with in a while, even We offer two services mainly, well, three services. We offer a vehicle-based certification program, which is the E-rating program. And that's mostly based on carbon footprint per passenger mile. But since you in California have those really new high-performance vehicles, you get even a higher rating, and it's good to participate in. And if you could prove having running below 137 grams per passenger mile, and as well as some other factors, you can get an E-rating label. You can use it for outreach and education for the public and for policymakers. And then we also offer comprehensive fuel efficiency consulting and campaigns for operators, where we do data analysis. We look for leverage points, everything from reducing idle and wash crew cycles and systems, and pre-trips, post-trips, as well as maybe even ways to operate on the road without affecting driver safety and comfort and passenger safety and comfort. And then we have online trainings, we do in-person work, and then with everything, we all know you could talk to someone once or twice about something and they usually forget it. So we try to create like just add water, easy reinforcement program. So Michael held up like a pin. We did some on-site work at his company, and drivers took online trainings. And then afterwards, drivers signed a pledge that they're going to embrace eco-driving strategies or idle reduction strategies. And well, then they put a pin on their uniform. And every day they get that reminder, or there's a sticker up around the shops or on a vehicle, and it's a reminder. So both internally and externally facing messaging for companies. And then we also do telematics support. So if you're one of your core competencies isn't necessarily going through telematics, and you don't want to manage those systems and programs from an efficiency standpoint, you could even outsource those to us, and we'll try to provide support on that front. So that's it. I feel like that was a sales pitch I was gonna for today, but
sounds good. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
As part of my Coach USA new hire training, that was part of it.
All right, nice. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed it.
I'm in Elko, Nevada. So,
well, I was wondering what that background was, Kevin. Is that Elko?
It's one of the gold sites called Bald Mountain. Yeah, so it's about 25 degrees today, so we're going through a warm spell.
If I may, Vicki, one other thing I'm going to put out to the membership: April 1st is a CARB deadline for those operators who operate 50 or more in their fleet, and or companies that are $50 million and above in total gross revenues of 2019. The CARB will talk to that, but that's an April 1st deadline of a report, and I'll put a link out for that. I think first I'll put out the link for the grant program, and then I'll put out the link. Any 50 fleet operators on the line right now? No, okay.
50 fleet, what are you asking?
50
vehicles.
50 vehicles in your fleet or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, Coach USA All West does.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, we're gonna have to find out if those are based in California. You have more than 50 in your fleet in California at any given time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there's you should have gotten an email from CARB on this, but there's a requirement, a fleet reporting requirement for those companies that are over 50 in their fleet. And then this $50 million as well in gross revenues. They think they can get the Apples and Googles and other companies who may have medium and heavy duty vehicles. So I'll put that.
I don't have more than 50 million in revenue. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, but it's not. It's first if you have 50 or more in your fleet, you've got to report. And then B, if you don't have 50 or more, but you earn over 50 million in revenues, you've got to report all your vehicles as well. So I'll send that link out. Eric, if you don't see it, please contact me directly. That's an April 1st deadline. And it's part of their whole movement that CARB is doing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Tony, March 2nd, Tony will talk, I think, briefly on that as he talks about 2024 to 2045. And CARB recognizes that the industry is much different than the truck industry, only because you all and we have been vigilant to sit down and talk with them. And they know that on long haul, there's not a solution for battery yet, but they're anticipating that the marketplace will heat up for it.
How about with Gavin Newsom's pledge to have all new trucks and buses in 2026 to be electric?
Yeah, well, the CARB is working on it, but I think they'll start with transit buses. They'll start with their, as we heard a couple of years ago from Tony, airport vans and shuttles and that type of thing, and then they'll ramp up. But Tony, who's the chief of this section, recognizes that there's no solution for the long haul right now. At the same time I say that, he does mention a couple of companies in the state converting, as we know, old transit buses to electric buses for certain purposes. So, well, Vicki, I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I think that's about it. That's
Okay.
Oh, one person just raised, Ginny just raised her hand. Ginny, did you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question? She does have a question in the chat that looks like it says, is this grant based on selection or basic application?
If you look at it's based on selection. And as I said earlier, it has 8, 9 priorities of types of businesses. 2 types are ground transportation, which you can apply through, and tourist and tour transportation. So both those, if you'll look at the legislation, you'll see those specified. And I think I also sent out, I'll send out the analysis, but the legislation is clear. You can read through that, but there's some priority for, I think, about 8 or 9 industry segments. Now you've already applied, so there's a closed section for those who applied in phase 1 and 2 and didn't get selected. You'll have to go into the next phase, and that'll be closed just to those people those businesses who did not receive in the first 2 rounds. So there is that piece in it as well, Jenny. And on your senator, you're working Senator Steve Glazer on one side, and you're working Senator Skinner on the other side, Assemblyman Bonta on one side, and a new assembly member. I think we talked to that staff, but if you could get back to that new assembly member's staff, that would be good. We want to keep those conversations going. So I see you're saying yes, good. So each one of you who, if you haven't reached out to your state senator or assembly member, call me. I'll walk you through it. It's on the email I sent out yesterday on the second piece of the $2 billion grant, which specifies the 2 pieces of our industry. And so call me, and I'd love to walk you through it if you haven't reached out. If you have reached out and you haven't heard anything, call me on that. Tell me who you reached out to. Maybe we have to find another email for the chief of staff or another staff person We need to build these relationships, and we need to keep focused on the uniqueness of your industry. The board, I think, has pretty well come to the agreement that we should focus on body type in your vehicle, your DMV IRP registration BS or BU, and focused on carrier type would be for hire. And then a third, weight, body weight, we've used 18,000 pounds, 20,000 pounds. We know that most of the coaches are in the 26 to 35,000 pounds, but we are trying to be as inclusive as possible. The Limousine Association didn't want to get involved at this point, so we've narrowed it down to just the BU and the BSs. And so that's it for now.
And one last thing I'd just like to add is Ginny added one last question that said, from the information that was presented about us being green, we are already lower in emissions than transit. So why the push to continue with electric for us right now? Is that a question that you can
I think
answer really quick? And then I think that's the last one.
I think Carb Jenny will talk about that next week. And I think it has to do with two things. One is the Clean Air Act of 1974, the federal act that requires the 4 air basins in the state that are still not clean to get to standard. So that's one thing. That's in the fleet rule, the bus and truck rule. The second is the governor's push. The previous governor, Governor Brown, and Governor Gavin Newsom's executive orders and push, and the legislature on climate control and trying to get, as the professor had talked about, when it comes to climate, this is one of the top polluters in the atmosphere is the transportation sector. So Carb will talk about that next week, but it's the policy direction, not only from the Clean Air Act in 74, but all the way through to our climate change policy in the state. Vicki is, yeah, okay.
Just putting Josh's contact information in the chat. So if you have additional questions that you'd like for him, please just let him know. I will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody with some attachments that both Josh and David have sent me. And I'll get a little update from Bronwyn. She's just texted me that her computer is just now kind of coming back on. So she had a major blowout, but she sends her regrets and her apologies for that happening. But I think that's really it for today. This recording again, this presentation has been recorded. I'll be posting this in the legislative page on our website. Please don't forget to register if you didn't already for next week's program, as we have Carb and the leaders of UMA and ABA joining us. And thank you very much for joining us. Any final words, Josh?
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And if you have any suggestions for us, please send them over to us all so we can read them, and we'd love to try to accommodate, but we really need help on finding that Susan Collins in our state. So thank you, Vicki. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
This has been California Cruise, and don't forget to save your money because our convention is on October. So don't go to Starbucks, put in your piggy bank to come to our convention.
Yes, the save the date for our convention in October will be going out today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.